There's heavy on my mind. And then I look at you, and the world's all right with me. Just wanna look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely when the day that lies ahead of me seems impossible to face. With someone else instead of me, I always seem to know the way. Then I look at you, and the world's all right with me. Just wanna look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely when the day that lies ahead of me.
Josh, if you want to take it away.
Very good. Well, first of all, we'd like to welcome all of our guests to the Art of Writing and Placing Op-Eds. This is the third in a series of trainings offered by Democracy Partners. My name is Josh Hoyt, and I'm a partner with Democracy Partners. We will use closed captions to make this as accessible as possible. This training will also be translated to Spanish on closed captioning by our friend Julio Acosta of the Reform Immigration for Texas Alliance, a project of the Border Network for Human Rights. In order to access the closed captioning, you have to click on closed captions button in the center bottom of your screen on Zoom, and then click on the show subtitles or the view transcript. I'm going to say this in Spanish. Hoy vamos a traducir este programa al español utilizando la función de subtítulos. Y para utilizar esta función, tiene que hacer clic en el botón de Closed Captions, el botón en el medio de su pantalla de Zoom abajo. Después haga clic donde dice Show Subtitles o View Transcript. Y lo mejor para seguir en español es hacer clic en View Transcript. So helping to support this call on both the logistical side and later with me and helping to harvest the questions in the chat is our democracy partner, Nick Guthman. Please place your questions for the guests in the chat function, and our guests will begin responding to these questions about 40 minutes into the training. Today's presentation on the art of writing and placing op-eds is the third in a series of trainings to strengthen our progressive movement being offered by Democracy Partners, a firm of 35 partners who develop, consult, advise on cutting-edge strategies for progressive values and winning issues in political campaigns. Our previous trainings have been putting the sauce into your social media, led by partner Cirilo Monego, and the art of public speaking by partner John Neffinger. In 3 weeks, on June 10th at this time, we will offer our fourth training, an intergenerational conversation about staying in the justice struggle for the long term. And I will be a participant, given all the gray, with our Democracy Partners, Heather Booth, and next generation leaders, Abdul Nasser Rashid, and Mi Gente leader, Tanya Unsueta. On July 8th, Democracy Partners Wyatt Klaas of the Big Bowl of Ideas and Yadira Sanchez of Poder Latinx will also offer a training on incorporating culture into progressive campaigns. We have a full menu of trainings on everything from community organizing to communications to every aspect of electoral politics. And this toolbox and the recordings and materials from this training and the previous ones can be seen on our website. These links are going to be posted in the chat function. Today's free session will be moderated by Democracy Partners partner, Jibby Martinez. As strategic communications consultant, her practice has focused on work with immigrant rights advocacy groups and efforts to grow the political strength of Latino voters. Before becoming a consultant, Jibby worked as a journalist for 33 years. Almost half of her career was in Washington, D.C., where she covered Capitol Hill and politics. She provided political and policy analyses for broadcast networks such as PBS, BBC, and NPR. She's joined today by our special guests, and all of us are volunteers. We thank our guests particularly. Jill Lawrence, the commentary editor for the USA Today, and Margot Friedman, a principal of the DuPont Circle Communications. Jill Lawrence has been a commentary editor of USA Today since 2016. She's a former columnist for Creators Syndicate, the US News and World Report, the Associated Press. She's won National Press Club, Sigma Delta Chi, and National Headliner Awards for her writing. She's the author of the book, The Art of the Political Deal, How Congress Beat the Odds and Broke Through the Gridlock. Margot Friedman is the principal with DuPont Circle Communications, a full-service communications firm founded in 2004 and specializing in writing opinion editorials for nonprofits. She's assisted authors with op-eds that have been published in numerous outlets, from the New York Times and the Washington Post to Political and the National Law Journal. Margot's clients include Death Penalty Information Center, the NAACP Defense Fund, Emily's List, Faith in Action, that's formerly the PICO National Network, and other leading advocacy organizations. I'd like to now turn it over to Jibby, who will moderate. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh, for the introductions, and welcome everyone to our session, The Art of Writing and Placing Op-Eds. As a consultant, I have written and placed many op-eds. I've also been rejected at least as many times. So we are all in this together. That is why Democracy Partners is honored to have two very special guests, Jill Lawrence and Margot Friedman, who can help us unravel the mystery of guest opinion writing. A quick reminder before we begin, please enter the questions in the chat box as Josh mentioned, and we will begin answering them as soon as we finish the presentations. The program has been designed to increase the capacity for questions. When you do, by the way, ask a question, note if it is for both guests or for one in particular. And also in the chat box will be links to materials and additional information provided by our speakers. Okay, so now kicking off our discussion will be Margot Friedman, whose firm DuPont Communications specializes in commentary submissions to newspapers, media sites. I've had the great pleasure of working with Margot in the past, and she is terrific. I'll turn it over to you, Margot. Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to share my screen. Thanks for putting this together, and thanks to Jill Lawrence for joining us today. It's a really special treat to hear firsthand from an op-ed editor. Last year, I had the good fortune to be able to work with an op-ed editor at the New York Times over a series of op-eds, and she gave me some feedback of what she was seeing from organizers and nonprofit leaders, and what I'd like to pass on to you what I learned. She said high-level outlets, USA Today, New York Times, Washington Post, and so forth, are looking for ideas that are novel, surprising, or unexpected. So really going beyond the conventional wisdom, going beyond what everybody else is saying. The caveat here is if you're submitting something to your local paper or a local outlet, the bar for thought leadership will probably be a little bit lower. So what do we mean by thought leadership? Let's break it down. It's a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot. It's literally having the idea first, moving the conversation forward. And here's an example from USA Today. Last year at the beginning of the stay-at-home orders, everybody was running out and adopting a dog or fostering a cat, looking for the companionship at home. That was the news story. That was the story that was being covered in the news. Julie Castle, the head of Best Friends Animal Society, moved that conversation further by asking us to envision in this op-ed, what if we didn't have animal shelters anymore? What if we could always clear the shelters and people took animals into their home, either as adoption or foster? And she had this wonderful line at the bottom, you'll see here, animal shelters could go the way of orphanages, which is just such a vivid way to put it. So going beyond the conventional wisdom, going beyond what everybody else is saying. The other challenge that we have as organizers is how to make this timely, how to answer the question that all op editors are going to have, which is why now? Now, if you've got an event in the news, something that's just happened, and you're commenting on the news cycle, obviously it's going to be timely and you have no problem. But a lot of times us progressive advocates, we want to put something in the news cycle that isn't already there. So that's when you have to get a little more creative with your lead. Look for new research, look for startling statistics. That's a great way to start. Sometimes you can tie your op-ed, your lead to pop culture. A new movie came out and you can tie your issue to that, something in that movie. Let's say the #1 trending show on Netflix is The Making of a Murderer, as it was a couple of years ago. That might be your chance to jump in and pivot and talk about convicting the innocent more broadly. Holidays and anniversaries of historic events is a nice peg. Let's say it's the 50th anniversary of the landing on the moon, and you want to take that lead and pivot to STEM education for girls or something like that. Father's Day is coming up. Labor Day is coming up. What can you do with those holidays? The only footnote I have here on this point is a couple of years ago, we had a call like this with Autumn Brewington, who is an op-ed editor at the Washington Post. And she said, if you know something's on the calendar, if you know it's coming, she'd like to see your op-ed 3 weeks in advance. And I know that's kind of a intimidating piece of advice, 3 weeks in advance for those of us who are used to scrambling at the last minute, but I think we can do it. Start putting those ideas on the calendar. Another great idea, this is another example from USA Today, is leading with a compelling personal story. It can be your story, it can be the story of someone else, but starting with a story. And in this example, Charlotte Clymer talked about being a 19-year-old casket bearer in the military. And it's very, very riveting, this opening. Folks always are concerned about, how do I write this thing? How do I lay it out? Gosh, I'm not really a writer. If you take a look at your packet, the packet that we dropped in the chat feature, this is a time-tested template that you can use, and there's more information detailing these items in the packet. But basically, it's get attention. We just talked about that. Name the problem, propose solutions, visualize the future. What would it look like if we adopted the solution? What would our society or what would our world look like if we did this together? Maybe you want to use that real estate for rebutting the other side's argument. We can talk about that, and then go to your rousing call to action. And I know that's what folks on this call are terrific at. This sequence also works great for speeches. It really works well for almost anything you're writing. So here are the keys to the kingdom. In your packet, I have put a copy of my lucky pitch note. And GB, thank you for getting it translated into Spanish. It's in your packet. This is that little paragraph you'll write on top of your op-ed to make a persuasive case that the op-ed editor should publish your op-ed. You always want to say it's exclusive. You want to give that one sentence compelling summary so that they can see right away what this is. Obviously, you want to answer why now? Why is it timely? Show your expertise. I've been organizing in this community for 20 years, and this is what I think of the new condo development. I do follow-up calls at 24 hours, and at 48 hours, if I haven't heard anything, I do assume they're not interested, and that's when I move on and offer my exclusive content to the next, to my next choice. My contact information is in your packet. And if there's anything you want to ask me that we don't get the chance to cover in this hour, please shoot me an email and I'm happy to talk with you further.
Oh, great. Thank you, Margot. Those tips are so wonderful. And I know that if people go into your packet, they will see even more details and hopefully you've given them a really good head start. Next, we're going to go to Jill Lawrence, who, as you heard, is an award-winning journalist who's received wide praise throughout her career. She was a terrific political reporter who I think I first ran into in some foreign land called Ohio, when we were doing work together. And of course, we were both only 18 at the time. But anyway, as previously mentioned, Jill will share how she approaches op-eds from her side of the computer screen. So please listen carefully because she's going to give some great advice. Jill, thanks for joining us. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And thanks, Margot, for your presentation. It was wonderful. I wish everybody would follow all of your rules. And of course, that would make my job a lot harder because there would be nobody to say no to, but it's all very good advice. The one thing I would add while I'm thinking about it is if you decide to move on, please tell us you're moving on. 48 hours sometimes isn't enough for us to get to the bottom of our email pile. So if you feel you need to move on, that's completely understandable and fine. Just tell us, we're moving on. So I was, as has been said, I was a reporter for many, many years and did not get into the op-ed business till about 10, 12 years ago. And first as a writer, as a person making the pitches, and then as an editor at National Journal and also now back at USA Today. And I'm going to read you a little bit of what I tell audiences. The last one I did was for Amherst professors and other professors who were thinking about becoming public intellectuals, as they call themselves when they go out into the op-ed arena. And so this is a little different. Everyone's coming from a different place, but the rules are the same, really, for a good op-ed. I've been doing this job for about 5.5 years, the entire Trump era. So there's been a lot of changes, including adjusting to no more Trump in the White House. And also, since I arrived, we've doubled the size of our outfit. We merged with Gatehouse, and so now we have over 250 newspapers, and everything we publish is available to all of them, which is not a guarantee that they'll all use it, but between print and online, a lot of things get good pickup. You can actually, I'm sorry, I forgot to put this in the links that I sent, but Gannett.com/brands is a list of every single paper in the network. And we pick up some network columns, they pick some of ours. And so, if you can't get something with us, you might try Cincinnati or wherever it's relevant. There's a lot of use for that list, I think, and there's some very big papers on it too. So have fun with it. If you haven't read our submission guidelines, I would strongly suggest that you do. There's a lot of practical information in them, including when we say, please paste your piece into the email, because we pass things around to different editors. And so an attachment can get lost or a Google Doc can get lost. And so that is important in terms of our efficiency and getting your piece seen. We're interested, obviously, in the why now situation. That's one of the main things we look for, timeliness. And we're looking for persuasion pitch to the other side, new information, novel arguments, revelatory insights, passion without partisanship, first-person experience, original reporting that reveals fresh angles and makes news, expert knowledge, and a topic that'll drive conversation on social media and in the real world. We say, our columns are 550 to 850. In truth, some of them are shorter. A lot of them are a lot longer. It really depends on how long it takes to, basically tell the story in our view. And online, obviously, there's no limit except what we feel is appropriate. And we must have exclusive access to it. It can't have been published somewhere else or submitted somewhere else. And we adhere to that very strictly, except for our own publications we do pick up from. So that we do. And in fact, the Charlotte Clymer example that Margot showed, that was one of the very rare instances where we took a Twitter thread and turned it into a piece. And we're very open about that. We'll say when we do it. We once, when Mitt Romney had some kind of very interesting Facebook post about the media and the importance of the media and respecting the media, we asked for permission to use that. But I could literally, I think only 5 times in 5 years have we done something like that. Another one was also Charlotte Clymer, who had written an amazing thread on what it's like to be trans and out in the straight world. And I mean, it was the kind of insight that you just could not find almost anywhere else. In fact, one of our editors said it might have been the most important piece we'd ever run. And so, we make these exceptions once in a while, but not often. We're very much interested in exclusivity. So we accept columns for online, and we're, as Margot pointed out, we're always looking for new angles. And there was a point where President Trump was withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, and I got a very well-argued, very factual piece from someone who said that Trump should be careful what he wished for, because if we went to war with Iran, we'd have to reinstitute the draft. And we talked about kind of the scale of that kind of a conflict. And I thought, I can't believe I'm reading something new about Iran that I haven't read somewhere else, and immediately took it. It was a person with good credentials for that type of, that type of piece. We love first-person pieces. We have a first-person editor named Kelsey Bloom who handles these. We run the spectrum. We had a piece by a person who was raped and impregnated at age 12. We had a piece by a student who walked out of a gun violence vigil at his high school because he felt like it had turned into a political meeting instead of a tribute to the students who had died. So we often have to pass on pieces, and sometimes there are just so many reasons that we'll pass on a piece that you absolutely should not take anything personally. Never take it personally. We may have something in hand that you don't know about. It may not just not work for us. We may think it's not written well. We may have just run something like it. There's just so many reasons. And if you ask me why, most of the time I'll just ignore it because I don't have time. But sometimes I will answer, and you really need to be prepared for what I or anyone else might say. Once when someone asked, I wrote back, too general and vague, no discernible news or news peg, no hook for a general reader, also too self-promotional. Now, if you can take that and you want to know, fine, ask. You might get an answer. One time I rejected a piece by a bunch of lawmakers about a trip they took because it was boilerplate. And I told the person handling it that if these people really went to visit this place, why didn't they start with something they observed or were told that placed them at the scene? And the publicists are usually grateful to get the feedback because they need to know what to tell people so that they can do better next time. There are times when we get things that are attachments, and here's another reason why that's a little bit risky for the people sending things in. You can tell from a document, and sometimes it even will say right in the news, the text, that you were not the first choice, that this was sent to the New York Times, or it was sent to the Washington Post, or it was sent to CNN. And usually our rule is, forget it. I mean, it's like, it's just it's a reason to reject something if we don't really feel that we must take it. I mean, sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes we'll take it anyway, but it's not an ideal way to present your piece to us. The other thing is that everything's a matter of taste and subjectivity. When I first came, someone said to me, another editor said, you could say yes and I could say no on something on the same piece and we'd both be right. You know, there's just no kind of absolute right or wrong in the op-ed world. I think when we see something we know we want, that's almost the exception. There's a lot of gray in this world. And if you don't hear from us and you want to move on, you should check back. We never mind if you check back. It's part of the never take it personally. It doesn't mean we don't like your piece. It just means that it may have gotten lost in the shuffle, or we haven't gotten back to yesterday's email pitches yet, or, you know, it could be any number of reasons. So never hesitate to bug us if you really want an answer and by a certain time. The other thing that I tell everybody, and I just had 2 examples of this week, yesterday and today, is if you have a specialty and you have something new to say on it, write it up and hang on to it and wait till something happens. You know, it's like, I had a piece about the January 6th Commission earlier this week, and we just held on to it. And then when the vote happened, we immediately put it out. This afternoon, right before I got onto this, I put out a piece by Stephanie Murphy, the Vietnamese American Congresswoman, and it was about Asian American hate. I said, we're going to hang on to this. She submitted it too late for the bill passing, but not too late for Biden to sign it, which I think he's doing in half an hour. So, you know, we timed it to the signing and it's out there. But, you know, you can do that, you know, with Mother's Day, for instance, or any of the holidays that Margot mentioned, and we'll save it. And the other thing is that it's got to be a great column. It can't just be about Mother's Day. You know, it's the same standards we use for any other column. And so, you know, one year we got 3 really interesting Mother's Day pieces. One was along the lines of give your mom the gift of understanding her story, basically suggesting you interview your mom for Mother's Day. Another one was by a doctor in her late 40s who realized she would never have biological children. And a third was by an inner city teacher who said his mother had never given up on his severely disabled brother, and that had taught him to never give up on his students. And it turned out that his mother was a very, very well-known actress on shows like Facts of Life and Different Strokes, and she had died the year before. So those were 3 really effective columns, and we ran them all. And our most popular column this year was something that I just couldn't figure out what the heck was going on with it. The Mother's Day column was by like a World War II specialist at AU, whose mother was born in Germany and associated Mother's Day with Hitler and his kind of co-option of the whole holiday for Aryan purposes. And he said, so instead we always celebrated VE Day and her survival because she was in the Dresden bombing. And for her, it was a godsend because she had been slated to be deported to a concentration camp 3 days after that bombing. And she hid out for 3 months, and then it was VE Day and she made it. So that turned out to go viral, actually, and for long after Mother's Day and VE Day. I still can't figure that out, but you know, a compelling piece is a compelling piece, whether it's a holiday or not. One time I saved a piece by a veteran for 3 months because it was about him getting reunited with his combat dog. And I wanted it for Veterans Day very badly. And he said that would be okay. He had PTSD, and this dog, he had finally been reunited with the dog, and it was helping him. So, you know, we all know it when we see it. And the same applies to these holidays. So there are certain things that I'll stop soon, but there are certain things that should go without saying, but I'll say them. Don't pitch us something that we just had, sort of like, you know, when you buy a toilet, then Amazon tells you, oh, here's more toilets you might like. You know, we're not going to take something like what we just had. Don't pitch a piece as a reaction to something that was written in another newspaper. You might actually write that piece and in the 5th graph, make a reference to what was said in that other newspaper. But, you know, the lead, we will not consider. I mean, if we love the piece, we might say, could you just, you know, redo this and put that in the 5th graph? Because, you know, we're not in the business of just reacting to what people say in other places. But so you can definitely understand that, I'm sure. Emailing is better than calling. Calling or emailing to ask, may I send you something, is just annoying because of the volume of what we have to handle. Just send it and make sure we know what it's about from the subject line, because particularly if it's something in the news, we're going to want to know that, and we will open that quicker than something that just says op-ed pitch in the subject line, you know, like that. So the other thing I would say is that everything we do is incredibly heavily fact-checked. And it may not seem like that if you're a progressive looking at a conservative piece, but believe me, it is true. We try to make everything as bulletproof as possible, and we have 2 and sometimes 3 levels of fact-checking. So everything, every argument needs to be based on a solid ground, solid foundation. And the other thing I would say, and this also should probably go without saying, and Margot got at this a bit, is that the more conversational, the better, and the less throat clearing at the top of a piece, the better. I had a couple of academics who sent me something, and I said, this would be a really great op-ed, but the lead is 275 words into it. And I cut off the first 275 words, and it was still like 850 words. And they go, "Oh my God, that's great," and it just worked out perfectly because they were very open to that. But you're not writing a news story. You want to put the point at the top, and then you build your argument. And if there needs to be some background, just kind of weave it in as it's needed. But let's not have 300 words at the top where people are trying to get through to your actual argument. Well, I think that's let's see, that's probably where I will stop. And I think that's probably more than enough.
Thank you, Jill. That's great. And I actually would like to follow up and ask you one question on one thing you just mentioned about whether to call or send an email. What do you think about people sending emails without the piece actually having been written yet, just to see if it's a topic that you would find interesting? Do you accept those?
That happens a lot more often with writers that we work with regularly because we know how they write. But I just told someone who had written one thing for us that I couldn't guarantee taking the piece until I saw it. And he said he didn't like to write on spec. And that's where it kind of sat for a week. And then he offered to write kind of an outline. And I said, fine, I'm happy to look at the outline. But we really try to, to leave ourselves a little bit of an out in case it comes in and it just can't be used.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. This has all been great. Now I'm going to ask our producers, Nick and Josh, for questions that have been coming in in the chat box. Do you want to start queuing them up? And by the way, do you want to stack up 2 or 3 at a time?
I can stack up 2 or 3. So we have 11 questions. I guess the answers should be brief. The first one is, are there particular considerations and/or things one should be aware of if the topic of the op-ed is an international, that is not the United States subject? And then how do you get the contact info to follow up call after 24 hours? The editors seem so distant. We'll start with those 2.
I guess those are for me. International is a higher bar than domestic because our readers, we do have a chain of papers in England and Scotland, so there is that, and we probably have some in Canada too. But basically, we do publish international things. We've had a bunch of things from Israel and the Middle East. And, in a situation like that, the more personal, the better, the more relatable, the better. But we also have pieces about vaccines and the global distribution of vaccines. And, I guess I'd say it's a tough sell, but we do take them. And the newsier it is, and the closer to the news, and the closer to human experience or some major issue or a major test of a world leader like our own, that there's definitely instances where we not just accept pieces like that, but we look for them and we need them. So it's always worth trying. And in terms of getting back to us, my phone number is at the end of, is my signature on every single email. So people text me. I'm not saying you should text. My husband actually said, if there are going to be 800 people on this call, you should get a new email address especially for that, and then cancel it afterwards. It's like, but my email address is the standard USA Today template, jlawrence@usatoday.com. And don't all email me at once. That's all I ask. And my phone number's on there.
And the
So,
next,
Marco, would you like to take on that last part of that question about,
Yeah, the separate question about finding contact information. I
yes,
would like to. In my packet, toward the end, there are lists. There are 3 different lists of contact information, websites that have contact information. Obviously, going to the website, the actual website of where you're going to submit will have phone number, email addresses, and so forth. If you have trouble finding these, give me a shout. I'm happy to help you find something. But basically, it's very similar to pitching reporters as far as calling them up. Maybe you get voicemail. Sometimes you get lucky. The editor just picks up the phone and you can say, hey, have you looked at my piece yet? I've been on the phone with people who say, who are you again? Tell me, when did you send it in? And you can hear them going through their Outlook box and starting to read it right then and there. So I'm very sympathetic to not wanting to get the phone calls, but the phone calls still work.
great.
would you like the next 2 questions? The first one is, do you allow authors to be anonymous if they are concerned for their safety, for example? And the second one was @Jill. Love the thread idea. Do you get pitches to publish those as well?
To answer the second one first, no, we don't, and we wouldn't like that. I don't think I've only published 2 or 3 in 5.5 years, and they've been extraordinary ones that I've discovered, or because so many, it's just not what we usually do. I mean, if you, I often go on Twitter. I've found some of my best authors on Twitter because they tweet provocatively. And but usually it's kind of a germ of something that they develop into a column. It wouldn't be something like the Charlotte Clymer Dover piece, which was almost in its entirety on Twitter. But I've trained her. She's now sending me her pieces before she puts them on Twitter. She wrote about portraits of the portraits of Lloyd Austin and Kamala Harris, changing the culture of the military and ultimately, the culture of America. And she was very proud of herself. She sent it to me. She didn't put anything on Twitter about it, no threads. So, and now the other one about anonymity, we don't. We insist on exact quotes having names attached to them. And in terms of people writing, the only time we have ever done that, and the time that I've been there, was a mother who had been separated from her children at the border. Gangs were after her. We had the lawyers involved on our side and on their side. We were allowed to use her first name, the ages of her kids. One of the editors, an experienced editor, suggested that we do a video of her to kind of, make it even more authentic. And we did do it. We had a Spanish-speaking editor who interviewed her in a kind of a shadow. And there were all kinds of measures taken to make sure she wasn't identifiable, but it was her, and so we went to great lengths because we thought the story was so important, that whole, situation. And she had been reunited with her kids. So, but that was very unusual. And we actually, when the New York Times published Anonymous on Donald Trump, every newsroom in America was talking about whether we would have published that. And, when we finally found out who it was, we're like, well, I don't know, this guy was supposedly a senior official, a high-ranking official, but he wasn't really. So I don't know what we would have done. I really don't, but the prejudice, the bias is always against doing that.
And here we have 2 more questions. The first is, when are 2 author submissions a good idea? How are these most effectively pitched to editors? And the second one was just curious as to how many submissions your team might receive in a given day or a week, and what is your acceptance rate?
2 author submissions are fine. The only time it gets into trouble is when you're trying to make it kind of first person-y and, one of us has done this, or, I mean, it's extremely awkward writing. One time I fixed that by giving each person their own section, but that doesn't usually work because it's usually intertwined. So it's fine, you know, for the normal presentation of an argument, but it's a little awkward when you're trying to explain. It's not impossible, but it's got to, you know, I usually rewrite those sections to make it clear who's done what and why this is important. I'm sorry, and the second one was,
Just curious as to how many submissions your
many we get,
team might
okay.
receive and the
Yeah.
acceptance rate.
well, we publish about 6 pieces a day. It's pretty labor intensive since we don't have that many staff writers. Some of us on the staff do write. Some of you may have seen the rant that I had out there today. But, you know, we all, we have across the political spectrum, and we all accept across the political spectrum. And I would say, I mean, there are some days when I'm seeing a pitch come in every 2 or 3 minutes. And you know, it's, and that's just to me, that's not anyone else or the forum, which is our official, you know, address. So, you know, dozens to me every day, and probably 100 to 200 over the course of the section. And, you know, we space them out. We're lighter on weekends than during the week. We only have room to print 1 to 2 a day, so very little gets in print, but print is kind of a very small fraction of our audience. So it's, you know, I tell everyone to think of us like CNN or the Daily Beast.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to circle back to Margot and ask if you have anything that you'd like to share about 2 author submissions.
Oh, thank you, thanks. It seems like a long time ago, but we used to publish, look for 2 authors, 1 Democrat and one Republican, these unlikely bedfellows agreeing together. That shows how reasonable this policy solution is. I don't know how many of those we're going to have now, but we used to do that.
We actually have a whole project on that called Hidden Common Ground, and America Talks is another iteration of that. We have a lot of, that is our brand kind of, except for me, I'm not that brand, but actually I write with my colleague, David Mascio, who's conservative, and we do agree on quite a lot. But those are 2 things to keep in mind if you do have across the aisle type things. We have an editor named Tim Swarens, Swarens, who handles America Talks and Hidden Common Ground. We were interested, for instance, in the 35 Republicans who voted for the commission last night. And I'm not sure what happened. We were going to try to get some of them to write about that. And I'm not sure what happened with that. But we are very interested in that sort of cross the aisle thing.
Here's another question. Do all other high-level outlets pass on op-eds that are not exclusive to them?
I don't know the answer to that, but we've had such trouble. I think they probably do, or they assume things are exclusive to them. I mean, one time we accepted something from someone and the Philadelphia Inquirer published it in print before we even got it online. And we had no idea that it had even been accepted there. And I'm not sure the author did either, but these are the kinds of things that can happen when you make multiple submissions.
How important is the messenger in your thinking about whether to take something or not take it? In other words, if the content is not super new angle, but the author is not a usual suspect for the message?
Well, unexpected is good, unpredictable is good. We have turned down many a celebrity op-ed because it was just nothing new, you know, it was boring. You know, it's gotta be compelling in some way besides the name of the author. We do look a lot for credentials and authority, you know, in terms of authors. You know, did it happen to you? Is it your research? We do a lot of academic research that people, you know, give us before it's published in a medical journal or something like that. You know, we'll do it, we'll have it out there in opinion form before it comes out, and it'll be more conversational and available to a larger audience.
Thank you. Margot, do you have any observations on the kinds of messengers that you work with or recommend?
Yeah, I sort of see them as 3 categories. And one category is household names. And as Jill points out, just being in a household name doesn't automatically get you published. But I think we all know Nelson Mandela or Bill Clinton or whomever could say something that maybe you and I saying the same thing wouldn't get published. So that's category one. Category two, I put this group in that category, where leaders at nonprofits, we're longtime organizers, we're people who have some expertise and credentials in our area. So we're sharing maybe some inside knowledge, some expertise. Maybe we're saying something you don't expect us to say, and that's even better. And then the third category, and I'm sorry for using this word, but in Washington, we talk about real people, like an actual person out there having a lived experience, an affected person. There was a wonderful op-ed a couple of years ago. There was an advocacy group that was trying to get into the New York Times talking about stop and frisk. This is before it had really bubbled up as a big issue. Advocacy group kept submitting, and the Times was like, no thanks. Then they found a young Black man who had been stopped on his way to school some incredible number of times. I forgot the exact number, but it was almost like three weeks, 3 times a week for the years of his life. It was just constant. And he published a first person op-ed in the New York Times. And he isn't a name any of us would know. And yet he had this amazing, compelling, important firsthand experience.
Just to add to that, the first person is really important, as Margot says, but you obviously can't really tell what's gonna take off. And 2 of the most popular columns that we've ever had in the last 5.5 years, one was by Rob Lowe about caretaking, because his mother had been very ill and he and his brothers were rotating through the caretaking. It wasn't even a recent thing, but it just struck a chord. And then another one was by a guy who actually has since died, a really great guy who was a budget expert on Capitol Hill and seemed to be the first person to talk about Trump's $3 trillion deficits or something like that. And this piece just, it came up for 3 years as one of our top pieces of the year. It just kept on getting found. And he was, Stan Collender was his name. He was a very authoritative budget writer who could really write, in a conversational way. And, but who would have predicted?
So the next several questions have a lot to do with these very personal essays. They ask, how do you fact check them? They asked if you fact check at all. You already said you did. Does it help you if links are embedded to support the facts? And then this is also similar. What do you recommend about navigating the passion without partisanship piece, especially when what we're working for are organizations that have a passionate view about their mission and their vision?
Well, I can take a stab at that. We always ask for links. That's part of our thing. And even and sometimes especially in the first person, they're very important for credibility. And we do our own research to check out people that we are not that familiar with. And we do ask for financial disclosure from everyone in the guidelines. If you have any financial connections to what you're writing about, that sort of thing. But, and if we have any doubt about the credibility of the messenger or the, just how it's going to be received, we usually will say no. But we don't often have that problem. These are usually very heartfelt pieces. In terms of passion, and partisanship, well, I mean, the piece that I have out today, which is about kind of Republicans' lousy choices between people who lie and people who are kind of Reaganites, and have these outmoded ideas about what a government should do and not do. I mean, I go through these pieces, mine and others, for language, so that it's not gratuitously mean or, cruel or, that it's based on reason, based on ideas, based on policy. You're not trying to insult somebody, you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on and why this party can't adapt, for instance, in this particular piece. I have a lot of practice with that because I've had 5 years of writing with a libertarian conservative who used to sit next to me when we were in the office. And, we still work together very closely, and I love the guy. I'm not trying to be mean to him, and he's not trying to be mean to me. In fact, the last thing we wrote together, I said, oh my gosh, is it okay if I use this last paragraph? Because it was extremely pointed. And he said, yes. I mean, you have to be able to take it, but you're trying to persuade people, and you're trying to not alienate people any more than you have to. You're trying to make your points as strongly as you can.
Thank you, Margot. Is there anything you'd like to elaborate on there?
No, I think that hit the nail on the head.
Okay. Here's a question for Margot. How do you determine what scale you submit your piece to, a local or state versus national level?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. It might be one of the most important questions we've had. And it all goes back to target audience. Who are you trying to reach? Who are you trying to persuade? I get a lot of groups that come to me and say, we need to be in the Washington Post because we want to get this bill passed. Well, the truth of the matter is it's going to be hard to get into the Washington Post, but even more important than that is your target audience, Congressperson X or Congressperson Y, the head of the committee or whatever. They're going to be a lot more worried about an op-ed that they see in their hometown newspaper that their voters and constituents are reading and that people are talking about back home than they are about the Washington Post. So that's kind of a good news situation.
Can I just add one personal comment on that one? That I worked with a group where we submitted an op-ed about John McCain regarding the Supreme Court, and when they were trying to block Merrick Garland, and we submitted it to the Arizona Republic on purpose, and they got pretty hot under the collar, and they issued their own response. So that's when you really do think about targeting, and I think in that situation it worked. Thank you, Margot, for raising that.
And this is kind of very related. Is there any preference as to who actually does the submission or reaching out? In other words, do you pay more attention when you get an email directly from the author as opposed to a communication staff or consultants?
Really, it depends on the piece. We don't pay that much attention to who's sending it. It's all about the piece. And in terms of the state, local, national thing, if the piece that GB was talking about, McCain went to the Arizona Republic, now I guarantee that USA Today would have picked it up. And we pick up an awful lot of stuff from them and from Detroit and Indianapolis, Austin, just a lot of different papers in our orbit. And our paper itself not only has all these local affiliates, but we are in the small towns of America. So it's almost like a two birds with one stone situation.
This is another very practical question. Is there a certain day of the week to avoid pitching?
I mean, that's a very personal thing. Like Thursday is a lousy day for me because it's my last day. I'm off on Friday and Saturday, but there are other people who work Fridays, and I work Sunday, and that's the beginning of my week. So sometimes I look at things over the weekend and get my week in order. It's just I'm really sorry that there are no rules.
And Margot, do you have any practical advice on that one?
In my packet, there's a wonderful piece when Michael Larrabee was letters to the editor at the Washington Post. He got interviewed by the ombudsman about how he selected letters to the editor. And it's really worth reading. They really pull back the curtain. And of course, he's now the op-ed editor at the Washington Post. But one thing that he said that really impressed me was sometimes the volume of mail, of letters to the editor on a particular piece is so high that he takes the first well-written letter. So being fast is really important. Being accurate is more important, but being fast, you see something in the morning, if you can dash in a letter to the editor by noon, you might have the benefit of being first. And I know that's hard with the approval processes that we have in our offices, but there is a benefit to being first. The other thing Michael Larrabee said in that piece that's in the packet is sometimes, and this is a little counterintuitive, Friday afternoon, which is sometimes feels dead, at least in Washington and in the summer. But that's when people have a little more time to take a look, and they're blocking out, well, what am I going to place on Monday and Tuesday? That they could be thinking about that on Friday afternoon.
So this also has to do with voice. Could either of you or both of you speak to how publishers are or are not amplifying the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in op-eds?
Well, this is a major focus of ours. We just had an API project with a bunch of essays by people. We have a reparations project going on. There's a lot happening, and that's just our section I'm talking about. There's a lot going on throughout the newsroom. And we're very proud of ourselves when we have 2 women in print on the same day. We definitely are looking for a variety of voices all the time. And you can look at our board of contributors, and we're doing better. We had a little bit of a setback when a bunch of people went back to the administration after, people kind of cycle in and out of government. And but at least in our, we have a woman publisher, a woman editor. There's a woman at the head of the opinion section now, so it's very top of mind.
Very good. I think we have time for one more question. Gibby can tell us when to stop. Do you have any examples of fraud committed by an op-ed submitter?
You mean fraud to us, or?
I think people that submit an op-ed where it's you learn afterwards they've lied to you.
No, we have not. I mean, there have been things I wished I'd put originally in a bio note that I've added later, but nothing like fraud, no.
That's interesting. And that's because you're probably doing all the fact checking. So you're, verifying the author and the content. Margot, have you had any, experience like that?
No, I haven't, but I did want to add, I'm not a flack for the New York Times. I'm totally unaffiliated with the New York Times. But I have had a few exchanges with op-ed editors there where they really are being more welcoming to by POC people than in the past. I think that's part of the whole transformation that our country is trying to struggle with.
Yeah, great. Well, look,
Well,
go ahead,
I was just going to say one more thing. Charlotte Clymer is a trans woman, and it's like, we don't make a big deal out of that. She doesn't write about trans stuff, but there's a voice that's there, that's writing about the military or whatever she's writing about. So, and it's made clear in the bio, but it's just kind of one of those, we have lots of different people writing about lots of different things and hope to keep it that way. And they're not only writing about identity politics or things like that.
Yeah, great. Well, I hate to call this to an end. The discussion has been great. You both of our guests have been terrific. I know that all of the folks online will agree, and thanks to them, to our participants, for the great questions. So again, thanks to Jill and Margot, and also thanks to Julio Acosta from Reform Immigration for Texas Alliance, RITA, which is with the Border Network for Human Rights, who translated today, because it was very helpful to some members of our audience. And of course, also thanks to Josh and to Nick Guthman, our producer behind the scenes guys. And Josh, I'll turn it over to you for some final announcements. Thanks, everyone.
Just thank everybody for attending. The notes on this link in the training will be, and the link to the recording will be sent to everybody who signed up and shared their emails. Our next training in 3 weeks with Heather Booth, myself, Abdul Nasser Rashid, and Tanya Unsueta will be talking about staying in this work over the long term. Again, that's in 3 weeks. You will receive an invite. And if you would like to see our training menu, please go to democracypartners.org. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.